I was kindly asked to an exhibition did an exhibition in London in Bermondsey a few years ago. That sort of really went well. Then the Russian State Museum wanted to do one in St. Petersburg. I did that, and then Olga Svivlova did one for part of the Moscow Biennale in Moscow, and then New York. So it's been fantastic. It's had a sort of bit of energy of its own. I've obviously got other things going on. This has just kind of done its own thing, which has been really marvellous. And actually, just also really, you know, I'm over 60 now. It's quite a weird thing to think I've been doing this since I was 10, so I've done it for 50 years. So I started taking pictures really when I was about 10 at school, and absolutely loved it, and related to a lot of people who were very passionate about it. My grandfather was very keen on it, and I immediately became very interested in it, and then I went on to another school and tried to do it there. That didn't go down so well, so it became difficult. Someone was caught smoking in the darkroom or something like that. So I then left there very early at the first possible opportunity, and really was very clear that film photography was what I really wanted to do. And then very fortunately, I was meant to go back to school actually, and I didn't. I think my parents still thought I was at school, but in fact I was living in London. And I was very lucky, fell in with the first group of students at the National Film School when that just started. And one of them knew somebody who worked with Stanley Kubrick, who was just starting to make Barry Lyndon, and said I should go up there and try and see if I can do something. So much to my surprise, got a job very, very early on the sort of pre-production of Barry Lyndon. I was about 17, and living in London, fell in love, had a lovely girlfriend. Life suddenly was a lot better than school, and I did that for about a year. And the job frankly was straightforward, but being close to him, there was really nobody else around at the time. It was just him, Ken Adams, who was the art director, and a couple of us a couple of people taking photographs of possible places and ideas that they really wanted to kind of investigate. And so I'd sit with Stanley every evening, go through all the pictures. He was very supportive, often tell me how I could do it better, what would be a better way of approaching it. Some fairly basic technical stuff I learned pretty quickly, because I think you were out fairly fast if things weren't right. But he was always very, very, obviously he was a huge figure for a 17-year-old to be even anywhere near. And for me, the really, the thing which has stayed with me more than anything else from that whole experience was just that there was never there was just no compromise. There was only one way of doing it. That was the best way of doing it. And if it could be a teeny bit better, whatever the cost, whatever the human cost or the financial cost, then it was done a teeny bit better, because it was worth it. I didn't enjoy school much, has to be said. I was at Eton at a very bad time. I think it was a very low ebb, and everyone was kind of misbehaving quite badly. It was all sort of big anti-establishment time. But it wasn't a good experience for sure. Whereas I think it's a great, it really is a great school now, but it certainly wasn't up to much then. And my passion was music, photography, all that kind of stuff, which frankly wasn't the kind of thing to be good at. And I ended up, there was this rather weird, this rather weird tradition of having pictures taken of yourself when you leave, and they're normally very, very, very traditional. Bow ties, tailcoats, very formal. So, being the late 60s, these became rather less formal, and they became quite famous. These very, very rather sort of, you couldn't even see the person in the pictures a lot of the time. Fairly radical pictures of appalling quality often of various boys when they were leaving. And then they were kind of all quite scruffy how they were mounted and scribbled over, and just I guess it was just trying to do it in a very, so these was completely the antithesis of the super smart, beautifully mounted. These were super scruffy. And so I started doing that, yes, and those were my first jobs, I suppose. I got paid a bit for doing those. And then I started, when I left, taking portraits of people. And then I got the job with Kubrick on Barry Lyndon for a while, and then went to Africa really to try and find my own, do my own pictures, do reportage work, and was really just trying to see how I felt about that kind of editorial, that editorial world, and spent a year between Kenya, Somalia and Ethiopia, right up in the sort of north of Kenya, a place you really can't go to anymore at all. Soon realised that I was most interested in sort of super high quality, sort of still life studios. Having done everything really outdoors, and all being all quite quick and informal. Suddenly it all became very, very formal. Always in the studio, always lit. Everything took hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. God, we had such crazy shoots. I mean, I did quite a lot of the Benson Hedges, some of the extra long Benson Hedges ones where we built crazy long igloo. A lot of it was a lot of set building, model making, special effects. So it was a lot of things now, which of course you can do digitally so easily, then were really, really difficult. And we were trying to just do things which people would just look at and go, my God, how could you do that? And for me, that was one of the joys of photography, which has kind of gone. I mean, other things are perhaps more exciting, but that's something for me which is really is a real backward step, in that you don't look at a photograph anymore, because you always would believe a photograph to be completely true. The camera never lied, supposedly. So to do those tricks really meant something, and that was for me a really exciting part of it. Whereas now, that's gone. Anything's possible digitally, and it all takes 2 minutes. The kind of pictures I'm doing now, which are, fun enough, so very, very different again. So all daylight, so all outside, using the best possible digital cameras I can kind of get my hands on, which are easily, reasonably usable, because I move the camera a lot during the exposure. So this is the real sort of look and feel of what I do. The camera's moving around a lot, so there's a sort of dance going on. It's quite a physical thing, and it creates a feeling, if you like, around the picture. So the picture's not just exactly what was there. I'm interfering, if you like, with that, and trying to create my own feelings around it. I always knew, so I'm if you like, the eldest son. Everything in England goes to the eldest son, and it's quite it sounds often a difficult approach, and it's certainly a contentious one, but one thing it does is it keeps a lot of these big estates together. So unlike in France, where it all gets broken up. So I've known all my life that eventually it would be my responsibility. So there was never a question about that. I think that that's on the whole a good thing, because then everybody knows kind of where they are. And I was 40, so it was agreed fairly early on by my father, and he handled it very well, actually. The sort of whole handover, that 40 was a good time to do it. That's when he did it, and that you're young enough then to actually hopefully make something of it, make a contribution. Otherwise, so often with these great houses and estates, the incumbent goes out feet first, aged 90 or whatever, and his son is 75, and absolutely not in position to be much good to anyone. So my father made that very clear. It was also a completely clean break. He was not really involved. He was very, very supportive, but not involved on a day-to-day basis. Goodwood's where I live, and my family have been there for over 300 years. So the first Duke of Richmond, who was the son of Charles II, who was the king, 17th century in England, had a beautiful French spy came over from Louis XIV to the English court, called Louise de Carouaille, and he fell mad in love with her, and she resisted him for a long time, and then eventually he had his wicked way, and she had a little boy, and that boy was made the first Duke of Richmond. So we have horse racing, motor racing, golf, flying, shooting and cricket, all in this one place, and all to a very high level. So Goodwood Racecourse is the only privately owned Grade 1 racecourse in England. We have the Festival and the Revival, which are the two biggest sort of motorsport, well, car culture and historic motorsport events in the world. We have this incredible relationship with cricket, where we have these very early rules. We have 2 beautiful golf courses, one built by the 7th Duke's children, because they became passionate about golf. The little girl was only 13 at the time. They commissioned James Braid, who was the great English Open champion, to build them a golf course before the First World War. And of course, shooting's been at Goodwood since the day, since the day it all began. And my grandfather was a great aviator and a great engineer and racing driver before the war. And after the war, he discovered, he had this Battle of Britain airfield they'd built on the estate, and they'd left a very nice perimeter track around the edge of it, which he turned into a racetrack. So Goodwood Motor Circuit was born in 1948. He, much to my fury as a young boy, he closed it in '66. I was horrified. I absolutely loved coming down for it. I was crazy. He showed me all the cars. I met all the drivers. He gave me all the books, the magazines. So I was really passionate about it, and thought that when I got back to Goodwood, maybe this was an area we could develop to try and help our business, try and develop some more revenue, and also bring back something which Goodwood had been famous for. And we tried to reopen the circuit. That proved to be very difficult. Noise, local government was very anti it. There was a lot of resistance. So we started the Festival Speed, which was in a different location, right in front of the house. We told we get 2,500, 3,000 people the first year. We got, well, to my horror, as I looked in my bedroom window that first morning, about 25,000 people turned up and broke their way in. And we had an incredible weekend, and we realised that there was still such a strong connection between Goodwood and motorsport that we then developed that. And Festival Speed grew and grew. That still happens. Over 200,000 people from around the world come every year. And then we managed to eventually get permission to reopen the old racetrack. We rebuilt that and have a completely sort of 50s vintage car fashion racing experience, the biggest historic race meeting in the world, all set to a period theme of sort of 48 to 66. And that started in '98. It's about being entrepreneurial with what you've got. It's about being really trying to be clever and think long term and drive a business with what's already there and what you've got, what's available, rather than dreaming up things which are completely new. So as I said, so many of the things we do, people wouldn't normally want to go anywhere near, but we've got to make them. We've got to try and make them successful. And in that sense, you've got to be, particularly entrepreneurial, actually. For me, it's really all about the sustainability of it as a business. How can we keep it all going? How can we create enough business, enough profit to be able to reinvest, to try and keep this whole thing alive and well? Because that's absolutely what we have to do. So there's no other business attached to it. It's got to, it lives or dies by its own success, if you like. And it's a complex. We employ about 650 people. It's a massive overhead, the whole thing, and for me, it's how can we create something that's meaningful, alive, modern, exciting, at the same time as sort of be respectful for its history, use the authenticity it has as a really sort of important part of the whole experience for those people who come and see it and hopefully enjoy it.